Hi guys, Freddy here, welcome back to another Retro RPG. And at the end of the poll this week, it's been won by Strange Aeons, a sourcebook for Call of Cthulhu. Now, just before we go over to the desktop to have a look at that, I'd like to mention that most of the chat that I used to do at the start of the videos, so about the way the poll's going, what the new entries are, and other channel related stuff, I've now moved to the end of the video, so we can get straight into the review as soon as possible, which I'm now delaying with this. But anyway, if you want to see that kind of thing, then watch after the review and I'll be back. But let's go over to the desktop and have a look at Strange Aeons. So this is Strange Aeons, a Call of Cthulhu Adventures book by Chaosium in 1995. Now, I don't usually like to cover adventures, as that would have spoilers for players and potentially ruin any games masters who are going to run them. So I will only briefly go over the adventures in this, but I think the book's worth covering because it does cover, as it claims on the cover, 3 unusual times and places. And 2 of these are really well fleshed out and could provide the starting point for a campaign. Now obviously the book's only 90 pages long, so it's not going to provide an absolute ton of material. It's not going to be as good as like the 1890s source book, which is about 2 or 3 times thicker than this, just for one time period, whereas this is covering 3. But I really feel that if you enjoyed these adventures, these definitely could spring off, and I do find that the settings themselves are interesting enough that you might want to keep playing in them. I'd also like to draw attention to the names on the cover, because these are not writers who usually write for Call of Cthulhu and Chaosium a lot. But one of the names here especially jumped out at me, Michael Labossiere, as I stumble over his name. Now, he is a writer who does a lot of work on the internet. Basically, if you are searching for Call of Cthulhu Adventures to download and play, then his name's going to crop up a lot. He does a lot of great settings in both 1920s and 1990s, and he's come up with a few really interesting ideas beyond that, where he sets them like these in different times and places. So it's really, really good to see him getting published and getting his name out there, even though that is 26 years ago now. But let's have a look at the back of the book. So, Strange Aeons. Bizarre events at a UN Moonbase. Pestilence and plague in Elizabethan London. Secrets of the Spanish Inquisition. Times of terror. During the month of January 1603, London is at the grip of a bitterly cold winter. The air is crisp with a heavy frost that is slow to thaw. Rumours abound that the plague is once more abroad in the city. Knowledge that weighs heavily on the populace. Numerous houses have already been boarded up. People have again taken to slaughtering stray dogs, wearing too strong perfumes, and applying arsenic under the armpits. The Pest House is filling, and the deaths are on the rise. Now you hear that Queen Elizabeth is unwell, and will probably die before spring. Everyone is wary of others, and foreigners certainly are carriers. It is a depressing time to be about in the city. Strange Aeons contains 3 adventures set in unusual times and places. In Renaissance Spain during the logical, dread and austere Spanish Inquisition, in a 21st century lunar outpost, in Elizabethan England, among certain talented playwrights. 6 pre-generated characters are provided for each scenario. And as I read that, I just noticed they've managed to drop the I from playwrights and spell it wrong on the cover. Whoops. I've had this for 25, 26 years, and that's the first time I've noticed that. But anyway, that is the sort of setup. It's 3 different settings and adventures set in those settings. And as you can see from the paragraphs there about the Elizabethan London setting, you can see how that would fit into Cthulhu. As the populace dreads the plague and they fall more into the sway of cults and away from logic and science and just hoping that magic and perhaps the mythos would help them. Problems would, cults come out and the mythos is on the rise, I would say, because everybody's already afraid. So that makes a very good setting for Cthulhu, as do the others. Let's start flicking through the book. So, we've got the introductory pages with a picture of Howard Phillips himself there, 1890 to 1937. An introduction and the contents pages, and then we're straight into the first scenario, the Garden of Earthly Delights. Now, this is the briefest of the scenarios, and it details the players as members of the Spanish Inquisition being called to a small village in Spain in 1597. And they are investigating goings on to see whether they are unholy and against the church. But, of course, this being Call of Cthulhu, they have a mythos base what's going on. And it mentions, particularly here, that this is related to some of the aliens in the Cthulhu mythos. Now, this adventure is mainly about the roleplay, I would say. As you can see, there's interviews here. While it details the arrival in the valley, I think this adventure will play mainly as roleplay between the players and the games master as they try and find out what's going on. There's not going to be lots of clues lay around for them to visit. It's all going to be in what they question people about and the information they find from them. So we've got the layout as they arrive, what's going on, who they interact with, and then we're on to the NPCs already. So the villagers who they are interviewing. And then we've got the Inquisitors themselves, so the players. And that could be a really interesting setup. As I said, this is the briefest, and it probably has the least background of any of them. But it could be a really interesting setup to have your players as a group of Inquisitors for the church, rather than investigators working for themselves, with the power of Mother Church behind them as they look for satanic doings and don't even possibly believe in the mythos being everything's the work of the devil type thing. I think you could have an interesting campaign from that. Now, Blood Moon is the second one, and it's set in the far-off future year of 2015 on a lunar base. Now, given this was written in 1995, the idea that we would have a base, or as it details, 2 on the moon, is completely unbelievable. But I don't mind that at all. I like sort of alternate history type things, or alternate futuristic history, where the world has taken a deviation, and yes, sure, we book moon bases. Now, it is more a timed thing, so I get a feeling rather than it playing out as the players explore and find clues and speak to people, there is a definite timeline going on. So no matter what they achieve each day, there's a ticking clock behind it. And I think that's how this adventure would play out. Now, it details the moon bases here, and there's a Mars mission base being constructed to take humanity onto space. But of course, we're on the moon, so again, we're dealing with Cthulhu aliens. But as we say, the events here, the first day and night, second day and nightmares, and so on so forth as time progresses, and as they discover weird things afoot beneath the moon surface. So, mythos background for what's going on the moon, technical data, taking investigators forward so there could be a shuttle or spaceplane pilot, space science specialist, EMV pilot, a space technician, new skills for that setting. We've got spacesuits of different types, different weapons to be used in space. This is getting towards Deep Space, or what Deep Space did for Cyberpunk, in taking you into Earth orbit where things are dangerous, and adding the mythos to that could be a really interesting setting as humanity goes out into the unknown in space and finds things that we weren't really supposed to know of. So we've got information about the moon. We've got the NPC characters here. The Moonbase personnel. A disembodied brain, which really goes back to one of the early Cthulhu stories that I read. And then we've got the players and their investigators. And then we've got the next adventure, Call of Cthulhu scenario set in Elizabethan London. Elizabethan onion? No, London. Excuse me while I trip over my own tongue. The King of Shreds and Patches. Now, this is a more traditional, I would say, Cthulhu adventure where you're going around and finding facts. It makes a lot of the timing and has William Shakespeare as an NPC, so I think having a lot of knowledge about him might help a games master in this one. But as you can see, there's maps of London, there's a lot of information in here. It's about his connection to another writer rather than about anything that Shakespeare himself much does. So we've got the discovery of a death, and the players investigating it, interviewing people. We've got different floor plans, information as they go around and speak to people and what they find out. A very traditional Cthulhu adventure where there's just lots of places to visit and lots of clues to pick up. Just lots and lots of it. Trying to flick. Entering the Tower of London. The Pit of Charybdis. And then we're on to things which are about the setting. So Elizabethan weapons, information about Elizabethan London, how the plague is affecting it, the effects of the plague, and then background on different writers and people. So Christopher Marlowe, William Shakespeare, Dr. John Dee. Liberties taken with history and geography to detail out that. We've even got some Elizabethan vocabulary, how words have changed. Diverse sources, so if you want to find out more. And then we've got character summaries, so different skills and things which are more suited to that time period. The investigators, and we're on to the ever-present loads of handouts for a Call of Cthulhu adventure. Just lots and lots of stuff to hand out for the different time periods and the different adventures. And then at the end, we have, pages will split, adverts for Chaosium, items, so the Nephilim role-playing game, various fiction books, the Elric of Melniboné role-playing game, Call of Cthulhu itself, and the different settings. So we've got Gaslight Adventures, Modern Day, and then we've got Pendragon, and order cards at the very back, untouched. So that's Strange Aeons. I like it a lot. I'm always drawn to adding Cthulhu to near future stuff. I've kind of run a cyberpunk game for many years, or a cyberpunk setting, not the rule system, not the role-playing game itself. But a game which is kind of cyberpunk, which is near future, which is just going into space, and I do use Cthulhu stuff a lot in that to add a lot of mysticism and mystery into the background. So I absolutely adored this book. I definitely think the Inquisition adventure would be very interesting. I feel that the Shakespearean Elizabethan one is a bit too highbrow for me, but people who are into that will probably love it. I think they're three very, very well done adventures, really interesting settings, and it's a big thumbs up from me about this book. So that was Strange Aeons for Call of Cthulhu, and it was the winner of the poll this week. At the other end of the poll, the loser was the Road Warriors for Deadlands Hell on Earth, which kind of surprised me because I love Deadlands Hell on Earth, and I'm always kind of surprised that it isn't as widely liked as I personally find it. But that goes out. It might crop up again in another winner of the losers poll in a month or two's time, and we'll see how well it does then. But that leaves the two spaces in the poll, and it's being replaced by Dark Force Rising for Star Wars by West End Games. Now this covers the second of the Timothy Zahn novels, covering Thrawn and the post-Return of the Jedi period in the expanded universe. Now, I covered the first book a couple of months ago, and we'll see how well this one does. Now, I've got a large Star Wars collection, and it's probably going to be cropping up a bit more, because I am going through my collection of more obscure games quite well. And although I've got a pile behind the camera that I'm looking at now, which I haven't covered, we've got a bunch of role-playing games there which I haven't touched on, so it's not all going to be stuff like that. But I am going to have to start returning to the same games more and more to get through my collection and hit the games I've actually bought a lot of source books for. But as well as that, I've got Mark Millar's Traveller. Now this is the 4th edition of Traveller, and it came out from Imperium Games in 1996. Now, although there's other Games Designers Workshop stuff in the poll, and I don't usually like to cover multiple source books from the same company over and over again, I do think this counts as different because it is by Imperium Games, so it's a separate company, and it came out after GDW died. But this week's poll is very heavily based around GDW and their products. But let's see how those go. Anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough, so thank you very, very much for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment below, because it does do me massive favours with the YouTube algorithm. It is very much appreciated. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.